Sabrina 90s comic issue 15. Hilda tells Sabrina to hurry up or they're going to be late for Enchantra and Ambrose's wedding. They go into the closet to warp to the Great Hall of the Other Realm, and a rabbit in a hat welcomes them to the wedding and hands them some paper, asking if they care for a program. Of course, the rabbit is another witch transformed by Enchantra, and he already knows Salem apparently. So why is the rabbit here? I guess she just wants to bask in the fact that they're still animals because of her, and make them put up with her. Hilda insists that they have to convince Enchantra that Ambrose isn't right for her, and Zelda's scared that she'll get turned to an animal too. Okay, so finally there's some contrast. Hilda's more brave and stupid than Zelda. Salem tells a woman in front of him to take off the hat, which was just hiding a tall hairstyle. Zelda was turned into a bird, but I guess she'll be back to normal because this is a light-hearted comic and she was a human in the Sonic crossover. Hilda's a cow now, but she'll be back to normal later too. Sabrina tries to look on the bright side that at least they'll save money on milk, and she gets teleported to Ambrose with Salem. Ambrose apologizes to Salem because Sabrina was the one who wanted teleported to him. He says that he wants to get out of this wedding. He's literally getting cold feet. I wish it was explained in the show that witches do this to themselves subconsciously with their magic because they know about the phrases and are thinking of themselves that way. He's thinking about the fact that he has cold feet, so his feet get encased in ice cubes because magic is too literal-minded. Things would make more sense if it was explained that this isn't the case for witches who don't speak English, and therefore wouldn't know the phrase cold feet. Sabrina says that their aunts said that Ambrose was doing this for all the wrong reason, and Ambrose says they just want to take it easy for a few centuries. Salem has an idea for a good deed of the millennium and takes off. Ambrose tells her to forget about Salem and sneak out with him the back way while they still have time, caring more about himself. And Sabrina is smarter than him, pointing out that Enchantra would obviously track them down and they'd get in trouble anyways. Salem goes to Della and makes a deal with Enchantra. He decides to tell her to marry him instead. And when she's incredulous about it, he says that people change. Enchantra tells Della to leave them alone, and Della complains, "What's the fun of being a personal assistant if you can't hear the juicy stuff?" It was nice of her not to turn into a fly for that, even briefly. I guess Enchantra used magic to make sure Della couldn't overhear things through the other side of the wall, but Salem already said everything he needed to say. Della doesn't know what's going on in there. Enchantra says that she can't marry Ambrose, and his reaction immediately makes it clear that he's happy about it. So it's weird of her to not turn him into a frog. She doesn't care because she's gonna get to marry Salem, back in his human form. Except I know he's a cat again, the Sonic crossover. So this can't possibly last. And I know the comics too episodic to have the guts to keep a change like this going, even for 10 issues. Salem would inevitably get fed up with her and be turned back into a cat. It wouldn't be a real change if Salem stayed with Enchantra because every main character is a reckless, selfish anti-hero in this comic. So Salem doesn't stand out in the slightest. He barely gets to do anything. It'd be easy to forget he was gone. Della's smart enough to question this and say that Salem doesn't love Enchantra. Oh, I like that the plot thread from earlier was wrapped up. Zelda and Hilda finally see Salem in his human form and find out he had been lying the last time. But all that happens is that Zelda remarks that if she knew he was good looking as a human, she wouldn't have yelled at him about scratching their furniture. Yeah, she would have. She wouldn't care because he wouldn't have looked like that as a cat. Fortunately, Enchantra agrees to turn Hilda and Zelda back to normal just because he says, "Dear, would you mind?" And it was satisfying that Hilda said, "Ah, it's a lot more comfortable sitting this way." Sabrina says that Salem's sacrificing himself to get Ambrose off the hook, and Ambrose says that that's a loyal pet. Then, just as they're about to get married, Salem instinctively licks his hand because he's used to being a cat. Then he coughs up a hairball because his stomach contents are the same as a human. This embarrasses her some more. Then she gets itchy like crazy because of fleas. But okay, I guess the fleas from his cat form are still in his human hair because some of them were on his head. Salem says that old habits are hard to break. But the hairball thing and fleas aren't old habits. It's more like this is never going to happen again as long as he's a human from now on. Enchantra says that she can't be married to someone with such atrocious manners, even though it clearly wasn't his fault. It was clearly hers for having turned him into a cat all that time. She's just not in the mood to be with him because he kept embarrassing her. This feels rushed. All of those things happened at once, in a row, in front of everyone else. Salem does have bad manners, at least the Salem I remember from the show. This would have come off more natural and satisfying if she got fed up with his actual personality as a logical result of spending enough time with them. We would have gone to actually see what him being married to her would be like. Even if it was for just a day, that'd be enough. But it's refreshing to see an arc be as fast-paced as logically possible after all my experience with the later Sonic comics. Ambrose is clearly not happy at the idea that Enchantress would marry him after calling it off with Salem and turning back into a cat. Instead of her being mad that clearly he had changed his mind about marrying her from coming to his senses, so late that I wondered what the hell took so long. Enchantress says she can't marry him after she dumped him in front of everyone. Her logic is probably that she only cares about herself and has been humiliated enough. I guess she was just in it for one thing. And she figures that she could always get another boyfriend who doesn't clearly not want to be with her. She's not even heartbroken? Like, if she was just with him for one thing, why did she try to marry him? I was looking forward to her getting tired of him from being around him and finding out that he was just using her for a free meal ticket. Of course, Enchantress wants everyone to leave the wedding gifts for her, and she doesn't care about having an evil reputation. Salem says it wasn't a completely selfless sacrifice, because there's only room for one cute pet in this family, as we see a surprisingly sweet moment between him and Sabrina for a change. It's weird to me that the plot thread of Ambrose getting married to Enchantress was wrapped up so fast. It seems like a big deal. But we could have seen him say "I do," and then the story could have cut to him disapproving of her bad behavior in a scene. And then she'd get fed up with him. That would be more natural and show off how the marriage would be, and make sense to resolve the plot thread in one issue. In the next story, Sabrina thinks she's gonna cut through the cafeteria to get to her gym class. Then the lunch lady says that she needs her opinion, maybe because she just happens to be a person who walked into the room. She says that she's entering the local bake-off, naturally having that as an outside interest because she's already a cook, and she needs someone to try her chocolate pie. Sabrina thinks that everything the woman makes tastes bad, and plans on using magic to make the recipe one for perfect chocolate pie. So magic gets the information for how to make the perfect pie for Sabrina. Witches could easily be more balanced and limited than they are. And Sabrina has no problem with the fact that giving her the perfect pie recipe will be unfair to all the other contestants. The lunch lady says that maybe she should have listened to her mom and become a construction worker. She reveals later that she's making more chocolate pie for the teacher and principal. Yeah, the spy witches must have made everyone forget about that gorilla incident, or Mr. Bunsen would have been fired. Out of nowhere, the lunch lady wants to go into business, getting ambitious instead of settling for chump change. But it's normal for chocolate pie to be seen as delicious. What did she expect? How would she know that it's better than all the other chocolate pies out there? So finally, Sabrina just now realizes that she made a mistake. But it doesn't cause her to immediately erase her memory of the perfect pie recipe, which would have resolved the plot by now. Instead, she goes all the way back to her aunt who scolded her for magic abuse for once. At least they usually feel like her friends in this comic, not people who just exist to scold and punish her. And they have a good reason to be mad at her here, so I'm fine with this. Hilda says that the lunch lady will end up incredibly rich from a recipe that's not hers, which is against witch ethics. What makes them think that a good chocolate pie recipe that everyone loves will end up making her rich? It's just one recipe, and last time I checked, everyone with a sweet tooth loves chocolate pie. She's just not going to stand out. Nobody's going to be able to tell the difference between her pie and the other chocolate pies and assume it'll taste any different. She'd need to build brand recognition first, advertise, and that'll be hard because she can't be the only one available to make chocolate pies. The stakes are far lower than these people think. Zelda interestingly reveals that on Sabrina's Earth, the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken was a witch who cheated to get a recipe that good. And Zelda thinks it was disgraceful, probably because it's unfair to mortals. Hilda says that they'll have to go to school tomorrow and change their recipe back. Why doesn't Sabrina change it back immediately? She feels sorry for the lunch lady, and the next day, she gets scared at seeing 100 delicious chocolate pies. The lunch crowd won't be arriving for a few minutes. Sabrina uses magic so that the lunch lady forgets the recipe, and naturally, Zelda's smart enough to realize that if someone analyzes the pies, they'll have the recipe, even if that's not very likely to happen. Sabrina says that they don't want to seem suspicious. Hilda decides to start a food fight, which ends the story. In the next story, Sabrina says good morning to her aunt, and Zelda says she can't leave the house today, even for a test. Zelda says that it's the alignment of the planets that happens every few years, and they call it Cliché Day. They're freaking out about that. I guess that was supposed to be hilarious. Oh, thank God it's explained a little. Well, No, not in the sense that the alignment of the planets making it happen is gonna make sense. No, that's stupid. Hilda says that whatever cliche a witch says, or someone says around them today, will come to pass, and then Zelda explains, your witchcraft will make it happen subconsciously. So it clearly explains that witchcraft can make things happen because of subconscious imagining and thought, which explains a lot. I guess the planetary alignment magically increases a witch's powers by too much, because the planets all add to her with their own natural magic. But I wish that was explained, because on its own, a planetary alignment shouldn't do anything. You know how far away the planets are from Earth? How would they affect them? Witches are lucky this isn't the case all the time, because they can already grant their own wishes effortlessly by accident. I'm excited for how the story will go. But it's just gonna be another one of the stories where something crazy bad happens because of their witches for no good reason. Most of this comic, escapist fiction or not, just makes it seem like having magic is just more trouble than good. Sabrina recklessly decides to try in excitement, saying don't count your chickens before they hatch, and the eggs turn into cute chicks, even though eggs only hatch chicks if they're fertilized, and store-bought eggs obviously aren't. She just thinks it's cool, being too flighty to realize that if her aunts are freaked out and scared about something supernatural, it has to be because they've had really bad experiences, or heard of people who've had really bad experiences, and so will she. But at least it's endearing to show that she has an appreciation for being a witch and witch stuff, instead of always whining that she wants to be normal like the sitcom Sabrina in the first episode, when the audience was jealous of her. Her being happy about this makes sense. Kind of. Again, they're experienced witches, listen to them! Confusingly, Sabrina's allowed to go outside anyways, even though her aunts are supposed to be in charge of her. And they said she couldn't go outside. For once I'm wishing they would take charge, because if they were strict, they'd protect Sabrina properly. But then the rest of the story wouldn't happen. Because Sabrina is considerate enough to make small talk with her heated neighbor over the weather being nice, he says it's supposed to rain cats and dogs later, which makes that literally happen. The Spy Witches probably have a field day erasing memories on this day. I imagine they're overworked. It would be more natural for this to happen if he said this when it was raining. He catches Salem, who thanks him sweetly, and the dog licks him, and he calls out to his wife that Salem's talking again. I'm sure she won't believe him and just assume he's senile, but it's too nice to put him in a retirement home. Disappointingly, we don't get to see Sabrina's reaction to this, missing half the joke. Hey, why doesn't he just... I guess he doesn't own a cell phone. I mean, if he was pointing his cell phone at Salem, Salem would probably know that he's being recorded. Sabrina asks Harvey if he studied for their trig test, being considerate. And Harvey says he didn't study much because he was watching a funny movie on TV and was laughing his head off. He laughs and then his head literally comes off, fortunately without any gore. And he somehow doesn't notice this and keeps laughing, because that's part of the spell apparently. Sabrina's reaction makes perfect sense and she zaps him back to normal, probably complete with a memory erasing. This could have been a lot darker, easily. The principal asks Sabrina if she heard the bell for class, and then Harvey calls the jerk a hothead, so I'm satisfied at his toupee being caught on fire. He could have told him to get to class in a nice, concerned way instead of being a dick about it. I miss the real principal. What were they thinking? We don't need any extra stress where there's a really annoying principal. Then, I guess it's Gina, says that Amy stays thin when she eats like a pig. Good thing this comic isn't depressing enough to say she's a binge eater. And then I actually giggled at seeing Amy eating like a pig. I giggled twice. Wow, that's impressive. The premise seems forced, but it's worth it. This is wordplay humor done right. There's consequences because she burps in class and says it must be something she ate, being polite enough to waste time saying excuse me. It was also pretty polite of Sabrina to ask if she's ready for the test for no reason when usually she hates her. Sabrina says relatably that she could use more study time. Amy says that it's not like Sabrina's a rocket scientist. So after all the time she called her a nerd, now she realizes she's not very bright? The phrase makes Sabrina a rocket scientist and she gets 100%. As well as a different hairdo and glasses because she believes that's how a female scientist has to look. Or it's how magic believes. It'd be more boring if she didn't look different. It would make Sabrina look smarter if she was the one who said the rocket scientist phrase, because she said that she wasn't a rocket scientist. So Hilda and Zelda turned out to be wrong, and going to school was a great idea. That's a twist. Sabrina says that she'd better get home before anything else could happen. If she knew that, why did she instantly teleport home? When no one would be seeing her. Instead, we see her at her mailbox, and Morton's nice enough to say hi and her name, implying that he at least warmed up to her. Too bad he's still an asshole, because when Sabrina's house turns into a literally sweet home, he threatens to call a neighborhood association meeting for no reason. I wish a thought bubble appeared explaining that he just wants an excuse to get rid of them because they have a cat. I was satisfied that Hilda said, "Morton, you were the nosiest neighbor anyone ever had." And there's predictable results. Surprisingly, this ends the story. The first story, by Bill Gallagher, was about Ambrose finally coming to his senses about marrying Enchantra when he was insistent that she was nice before. I don't know, maybe because he walked past that rabbit. And Salem says he'll marry her to get Ambrose out of it, but then reveals that he's too used to being a cat, and it humiliates Enchantra into breaking off the marriage because of mishaps that were ultimately her fault. She should have known that. Then she says that she can't marry Ambrose because she just dumped him in front of all those people. And she's so casual about this, saying that she'll end up married again later. It's as if she never really loved him and she was using him too. But that came out of nowhere. They wrapped up that plot thread as fast as logically possible. I would have preferred if Enchantra broke up with Salem for calling her out on her bad behavior when they were married after trying to be quiet at first. So we get to see what their marriage would have been like. That would have been a natural way to end the plot thread, which could have happened just as fast as a series of unfortunate coincidences, which just make it look rushed to bring the status quo back. I feel like this is only the second issue with this Enchantra and Ambrose plot point, and it's already resolved. But it'd be more underwhelming if it was Salem and Enchantra from the start, instead of Ambrose just being introduced to the comic for this little arc. The second story is about Sabrina guaranteeing that the lunch lady will have the perfect chocolate pie recipe to win a contest, not thinking about the fact that that'd be unfair to the other contestants because she just likes the one she's seeing. She is a relatable protagonist. She's not incredibly lawful stupid. Then all of a sudden the lunch lady turns out to be ambitious and she wants to start a business and be famous. It's just one recipe. And it's a recipe for a delicious dish that has a lot of stiff competition. They could have tried the plot with some other recipe. But the point is that Hilda and Zelda think it's wrong of Sabrina. So they start a food fight with the pies after Sabrina erases the lunch lady's memory. I can't help but feel sorry for the lunch lady. We didn't know her as ambitious and wanting to get a job more high-paying and famous before this point, so it came as a sudden shift. This would have felt a bit more natural if, like I had assumed, she had gotten the chance to enter and win the contest first. And then the ego boost from knowing for a fact that her pie recipe was the best would naturally spur her on to do more with the recipe. She didn't see other people eat chocolate pies and proclaim that hers was the best. The whole plot never would have been this long. Sabrina would have erased her memory of the recipe and gotten rid of the pies the minute she realized she had made a mistake. And the third story is about, because of a planetary alignment somehow, every phrase that someone says in front of Sabrina coming true for her, which actually helps her in the end. It's a random events plot, so it's not as memorable, but it was amusing enough. I guess the Spy Witches figured they could afford to not bother to erase Morton's memory of the fact that the cat talked, because nobody was believing him. So, I guess they're that overworked. So that's why he said the cat talked again. Maybe he forgot about the gingerbread house, or maybe he didn't, but again, no one would believe him.